Hello again and thank you for joining me. Today I would like to show you a quick beginner's tutorial on how to draw this mango using colour pencils. Now I have chosen to draw a mango today because the transitions between the greens and the yellows and that blush tone will give me a good opportunity to show you how the colour pencils will layer together to create these soft blends between colours. Today I'm going to be using my Polychromos pencils and I will list all of the colours that I used in the description below. I have also completed this same drawing with some Prismacolor pencils, and I'll also list the colours that I used to create this piece in the description below. I will be using some odorless mineral spirits to blend out the pencils. Now I am using the Art Spectrum brand, but all brands of odorless mineral spirits are essentially the same thing. Today I will be using some Arches hot pressed watercolour paper. Now this is a complete indulgence on my behalf and you absolutely do not have to spend this much on paper. I'm just experimenting with some different surfaces at the moment. What you really need is a reasonably sturdy paper with a little bit of tooth to the surface, and I'll list a bunch of suitable papers below. Now here is the reference photo that I'm going to be working from today, and I'll have this posted up on my website along with some written step-by-step instructions and a line drawing for anybody who feels like they need that. Now I've drawn out my mango onto my piece of paper with some graphite, and I've drawn it a little darker than I usually would just so you can see what I'm doing. I have used my yellow pencil to put that top edge in, otherwise the graphite will get stuck underneath the colour pencil and I won't be able to erase it when I'm finished, and that will bug me no end. So that's just there so you can see where I'm working. Now the first thing I'm going to do is add in a layer of my white pencil just so I can stick in a little bit of a highlight, just a little bit of a reflection on the edge to give this mango a little bit of shape. I'm not pressing very hard at all, but this is just going to give me a little bit of a protective layer and give me a bit of a safety against accidentally colouring too dark over this highlighted area. The white pencil will stop the yellow from staining the paper, so if I go too dark later on, I'll be able to lift off any excessive colour with some thinners. And I'm going to stick a little bit of that white just in that crack where there's a bit of reflected light coming off the table. Next I'm going to use a sharp cadmium yellow pencil, and I'm going to colour in pretty much most of this surface. First thing I'm going to do is just sort of lightly plot out the shape of the area that I'm going to be doing with my yellow pencil, just to give myself a little bit of reference. That's pretty much the shape there. I'm only pressing very, very lightly. I really don't want to dig into the paper at all doing this. This is just guidelines for myself. And a little bit from the tip there. Okay, so that's the basic area mapped out. So I'm going to take a sharp tip pencil and colour in this whole area very lightly with a small circular motion, or sort of maybe even an oval sort of motion. Definitely not scrubbing backwards and forwards, just lazy circles until I've covered this whole area. Now I keep my pencil reasonably sharp as I work, not by constantly sharpening my pencil, but by rolling the tip of my pencil as I work. That way I'm always sort of using the sharpest end of the pencil that I can, and this just saves me from constantly having to sharpen my pencils and wasting any more pencil than I have to. And I'm going to keep going like this until the entire surface is covered. Now as I work up into this blush area, I'm pressing super light, just putting the barest hint of pencil down onto that paper. So I'm going to pick up my Pompeian red pencil now and lightly start colouring the blush area. Once again, just colouring in lazy circles, and where the red meets the yellow, I'm going to colour lightly just over the top of the yellow. And you'll see how the colours start to combine together to create a really nice transitional colour between the two. I'm pretty happy with the coverage of the red now, so I'm going to take some of that yellow back over the red, smoothing out that transition even a little bit more. Do exactly the same thing as I did just then with the May green down on this other tip here. Just bringing that green up into the yellow, very, very lightly letting it sit on the top. Not pressing very hard at all. And then bringing some of that yellow down into the green. Now this is our mango, and we can colour it however we want. So if I want to put a little bit of that Pompeian red blush just up on the side there, I can do that. And if I want to put a little bit more green up here, I can certainly do that. We don't have to be a slave to the reference photo in this. Every mango's different, so we really don't have to be perfect. But I really do not want this green and the red to mix, and I'll show you why. So you can see here where I've experimented with mixing my colours. You can see that the yellow and the red have come together to create a really nice subdued orange colour, and the yellow and the green have come together to create a really nice lime green. But my green and my red have come together to create a really muddy, darker brown colour. You can see here on my super simple colour wheel where the yellow and the green are sitting right next to each other. So I know they're going to blend together really easily and create a really pretty colour. And my yellow and my red are at least on the same side. I know they're going to blend reasonably well. But as you can see here, my green and my red are sitting directly opposite each other on that colour wheel. And this means that they are complementary colours and that they're going to cancel each other out as they blend, creating darker and less saturated colours. Now, this could be a very handy colour to mix, especially if I wanted to add some strong shadows or even some bruises to my mango. But that's not what I'm looking for today. I want to keep my mango fresh and bright looking, so I'm going to be extra careful to keep these two colours from mixing together as I go forward. Now that I'm happy with the amount of pencil that I've got down for this first layer, I'm going to start blending it out for the first time. I'm going to dip it into the thinners, wipe off as much excess as I can, even get a little bit more off on here, and I'm going to start tapping it into the paper. Same way as I did with the pear tutorial, I'm just going to slowly work around and work the pigment of the pencil down into the bottom layers of the paper. Now I'm going to clean my brush off as I go into that yellow. I don't want to take any more of that red into the yellow, bright yellow areas that I want. So I'm going to clean it off, and then I'm going to start working into that. Now, if I didn't clean that off, I might end up transferring some of that red into areas where I want to keep my yellow nice and bright and clean. Yellow can sometimes be a little bit unforgiving, and any darker stains that I get are probably going to be there to stay. The idea of this first layer of thinners is just to push the pigment down to get the paper covered. It doesn't have to be perfect. We will definitely be adding some more layers on top after this, but it'll just get a nice base layer down as we go forward. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my green gold pencil to put a layer of shadow underneath the mango, and I'm going to use my Indian red to shadow that blushed area. So as I'm looking at my reference photo, I can see that there's a little area where there's some light bouncing back up off the white table. So I'm going to be careful not to colour in the entire bottom half of the mango completely shadowed, just leaving a little bit of that lighter area, and that'll really help to form the three-dimensional shape of the mango. And just quickly I'm going to take my cinnamon pencil and just run it up quickly along the seam of the fruit. Now this is a really small step, but like that little bit of reflected light, it really adds a lot to the overall three-dimensional shape of the fruit. And now I'm going to go over the whole thing again with my base colours, just to strengthen everything up and get that colour really saturated onto the page. Alright, now I've got a decent layer of pencil onto the paper. I'm just going to blend that out with my thinners, and I'm going to make sure that I have a super dry brush, because at this point I'm going to start lifting pencil back off the paper if I have too much thinner on my brush. So it's super dry. I'm barely getting anything off that at all, and I'm just going to very lightly start to blend this together. I really don't want to move anything too far from where I've put it. If at any point that I find I've got too much thinner on my brush and I'm pushing around way more pencil than I really want, I'm just wiping off the excess on this extra little piece of scrap paper. It just soaks it up really nicely. Alright, I'm pretty happy with that, so I'm going to let that dry, and while I do, I'm going to work on putting in the stem and the shadow underneath the mango. Now the stem's super easy, it's just a tiny little knob up at the top. So basically I'm just going to take my Payne's grey pencil and just sort of stick in a couple of little lines to show the shape of it. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm going to use my green gold pencil just to sort of blend in and just create the shape of that stem without worrying too much about, you know, really complicated details. It just really doesn't need it. It's not that much of a feature. Okay, so now I'm going to go underneath the mango and I'm going to add my shadows, and I'm going to use my Payne's grey and a cold grey 3, and I'm first going to start off by adding the very darkest area of the shadow underneath the mango, being very careful to sort of follow that line of the shape of it. So the darkest area is just underneath the fruit, just where it's touching the table, where no light is really getting to, and you can really go quite dark there. And then I'm just going to add the cold grey 3 in the areas where I can see that there is a shadow being cast, just very lightly. Just barely feathering the paper as I get to the edge of that shadow. Alright, then I'm just going to build up the colour just underneath the mango, but making sure I don't put too much of that grey near the edge, because I want to be able to fade that shadow completely out into the white. And then I'm going to take a very dry brush with my thinners and just very lightly blend that out. Super dry. Being very careful not to take that Payne's grey up into the fruit. Being very careful, because that'll be nearly impossible to remove if I accidentally push that up too far. Okay. Okay, and we'll just wait for all of that to dry. Okay, so at about this stage of the piece, what I'm going to do is I'm going to step back a little bit and just have a really critical look on what I might want to change. So this is really going to be my last couple of layers. And I want to look and see, is there anywhere where the shadows need to be darker? Is there anywhere I want to be brighter? Is there anywhere I want to blend it out a little bit better? I'm looking at this now thinking, well, I need to make the shadow on the bottom a little bit darker. And I think the top area here needs to be a little bit more saturated. So I'm going to add one more layer, keeping in all these little things in mind, and I'm just going to keep asking myself, is there anything else that I'd like to change as I go? Now my very last step is going to be to add some little blemishes and marks. Now this particular mango doesn't have many, it was very fresh, but once again this is your drawing and you can put in as many or as few little marks as you like. So the tricky thing about little marks like this is keeping them somewhat random. It can be really easy to slip into making patterns while you're doing this, so slow down and take your time and pay attention to where you're putting these marks. Today I've just run a few more dots up along the cleft and I'm spattering a few marks around the tip. I'm only pressing really lightly as I do this. Just the tiniest little mark will do, or else you risk that Payne's grey smudging out into your yellow when we blend this. I'm going to add a few little red halos around some of these markings just for a touch of variation to those marks. I find that sometimes these little imperfections can really bring life into a drawing, especially when you're drawing something as plain as a piece of fruit. So my very last step is going to be to blend those markings and that top layer of pencil just down. That'll sort of take some of the harshness off those marks. I cannot stress any more the importance of how dry this brush has to be. I really don't want to smudge anything at this point. I'm just ever so lightly blending it together. And just barely touching the paper. I see I've gone a little bit farther and lifted up a bit much. Take some more thinner off that brush. If you do find that you're moving too much pigment and you've got too much of that thinner on your brush, it's okay. You can just put down another layer. It really doesn't do any damage. It's just a little frustrating to have to go over a spot over and over again. I'm just cleaning off the mucky colours there before I go into that yellow area. Okay, so that paper's a little bit saturated. I'll just use this one here. Just really super dry. Barely taking any, you can see that hardly anything's coming off that at all. And just knocking those markings down a little bit. Just so they become a part of the mango rather than sort of sitting on top. So there you go. Here's the finished product. Now, I drew this mango out 4 times so I could try and find the easiest way to explain the process. And as you can see, each one of these is the same, but just a little bit different. The Prismacolor one turned out a little bit brighter in colour, and they all have slightly different shapes and shadows. Please don't ever feel hung up on making a piece perfect. While I certainly have a favourite piece here, that doesn't make the rest wrong or bad, and your mango can look any way you want it to. I hope you've learnt a little bit about how colour pencils blend together in this tutorial, but the best way to find out is to give it a go for yourself. So I hope you give this a try. If you do, please tag me on Instagram and show me how you went. I hope you've enjoyed this. Please leave a like or a comment to tell me what you think, and if you'd like to see more, please hit that subscribe button. Thank you for watching.